Okay, so I think it's we can start very, very soon. So I see that today we have a very international crowd. We have Michael from Michelle from San Diego, Tijuana. So that's good. With a co-working space, gonna work on a co-working space. So that's they already have co-working space and co-living spaces also in Tijuana. That's great. I didn't know Tijuana has co-working spaces. I was there only for a short time, and I see that we also have everyone else is from Bulgaria apparently. So we have Emilio that is now in the US, but originally from no, he's now in Bulgaria, and also we have Madison. Madison is going to join me later discussing the trends. Matthias is also going to join us later discussing a little bit about a few co-working insights. So that's super cool. And of course, Porto. And by the way, I was in Porto 2 months ago. It's one of my favorite places. So we have Thomas from Munich, who is searching for a co-working space. So hopefully we'll convince you that, yeah. So Leo is from Facts Co-working. I haven't been there. I should visit you next time. We have one more person from Sofia. That's great. So Ellie is from Sofia, helping friends put together co-working, co-living. Very interesting to see that a lot of you are also in the co-living space. And we also have, by the way, Ellie, I was doing co-working for a long time in Beta House in Sofia for 2 months. That's a really cool space. And we also have John from Hulu, that they have a co-working space as well. That's interesting. I was, by the way, John, I was in Helsinki last week, cool city, and in Espoo. Great, super cool. I'm now in Vilnius, in Lithuania. So we have a very varied crowd today, and some of you are actually managing co-working spaces. So hopefully the insights that you're going to receive from Madison and Matthias are going to be worthwhile. The last webinar that we had, by the way, about 5 hours ago, everyone was only considering joining a co-working space. So that's a little bit of a different crowd. So good. I'm going to share with you a presentation soon that we have prepared for the event, and I'm going to tell you exactly what is the plan for today. So just a minute, I'm going to need you to confirm that you can see my screen. So I'll meet you in a second. Whoever arrived now and still hasn't introduced himself or herself, please do. It's one of the goals of doing this webinar, to connect and to network everyone in the co-working ecosystem. Either you're looking for a co-working space or you're running one. So, and yeah, the idea is that to keep it a little bit interactive. So when Madison joins, and then when Matthias joins, and of course, when I speak, feel free to ask questions. You can do that either via the chat. If you are using the chat, again, another reminder, it's a little bit tricky, but you have to change the arrow to all panelists and attendees. Currently, it's going to be on all panelists, and then nobody's going to see the chat. So change it to all panelists and attendees. Write a question if you have one, and also you can always use the QA button that is below to submit a question, or via the chat, whatever works for you. So that's great. Okay, let's see if people can see my screen. So just a second. Okay. Can you see my screen? Can someone confirm that you can see the presentation? Yes, very good. Thank you, Renee and Michelle. Great. So today we're going to speak about co-working, the good, the bad, and the future. That's my email, eli@startupblink.com. If you need something, let me know. That's my Twitter, not Serious Eli. So you can always be in touch there as well. Quick introduction about myself. I've been a digital nomad for the last 8 years. I've been traveling in more than 60 countries, living in more than 40. Usually I stay 2 months in a country and then go to the next one. This is not the topic of this conversation. So basically, if you want a little bit more information about it, you can go to becomenomad.com. And over there, you can kind of get a little bit more information about. I have a blog and a podcast about this lifestyle of changing locations constantly while working remotely. So might be interesting for some of you. And that's basically it. I have to say that the only anchor that I have as I move is co-working. That's the first thing that I check. If a place has a co-working space, I stay. If not, I don't, because that's kind of the must. And I've done co-working in dozens of countries. I'll just say that working on a startup really allows you a lot of liberty of moving around between locations, and that's why I enjoy it. And as a side note, without co-working, I would not do what I do. I had my first 6 months traveling, not knowing that the co-working concept even exists. And those were difficult 6 months when I worked at home. And yes, and today we're going to talk a little bit about the disadvantages even of working at home. And then my friend from Buenos Aires told me that about the concept of co-working. It sounded amazing, although I have to say that it was very difficult for me to understand the concept of paying for an office, because we have in our heads the concept of being paid to be in an office. So that was a little bit of a shock. But the minute I tried, I understood that this is probably one of the best things that happened to me. Okay, so basically, let's see. So after this introduction, I'm going to tell you a little bit about StartupBlink. Basically, StartupBlink, which is my main project, is a global startup ecosystem map, mainly focusing on startups. We have tens of thousands of startups registered in the platform, and we're also having a research center, which means that we rank more than 100 countries and more than 1,000 cities according to the startup ecosystem strength. So if you're interested to know where your city and country are, you can go to startupblink.com and kind of see the ranking there of the city and country. I have to say that this is a very valuable tool also for co-working owners to kind of figure out if the ecosystem is pretty good, maybe especially for potential co-working owners. If the ecosystem is good, it's a good sign that it's time to put a co-working space if you're the only one in town, and if not, maybe it's not. So pretty cool rankings there that you can check. And if you have a startup, please add it. You see here an add startup button, startuplink.com. So the topics for today, gonna speak a little bit about myself. Done that. Soon Madison from coworker.com is going to join me, and she's also going to have the opportunity to introduce herself and speak a little bit about Coworker. So before we do that and actually go into panel mode with me and Madison discussing trends, and then Matthias joining us also, I think that Will is here as well, so I'll try to incorporate Will as well if everything is working. Will is managing Locus Coworking space in Prague, and has been a long time helper. So we're going to try to get you there as well to the panel. So before that, we're going to do a quick introduction of the co-working concept for those of us who are not running a co-working space and are only interested in doing co-working. We're going to discuss a little bit the advantages and disadvantages of co-working. Then Madison and I are going to speak about trends in the co-working world and a little bit about Coworker. They have amazing information. They're the biggest co-working directory in the world. So Madison has a lot of very good information for us to share. And basically later we're going to do a panel with Madison, myself, Matthias, and Will. So that's the plan for today. Hopefully some good insights for all of us. Okay, so a little bit about what is co-working. At the base of it, co-working is shared office, which basically offers hot or fixed desks for entrepreneurs and freelancers, usually. The idea is that you have a few packages that you can choose from. Usually the fixed desk, when you actually put your screen and get a little bit more of stability in this unstable world, it costs a little bit more than the hot desk where you actually move between places. I prefer the ones that are moving, the hot desk, because it allows me to kind of get to know everyone. So, and it's also cheaper. So that's kind of my preference as a co-working user. Other than that, you can also rent small offices usually for startups that are just starting and have a team of about 3 or 4 people, or a service provider or agency. They also usually like the offices. And one more function of co-working spaces is for the event space and the conference room. You can rent them as well independently, even if you're not a member. That's a big theme for co-working events, basically. And as you've seen here, the most important thing is the free coffee. So that's kind of like my favorite as a user. Too much coffee. I'm drinking like way too much. I'm gonna quit soon of coffee. Okay, if you have any questions before we switch to a few reasons of why, you know what, let's switch actually to and then go for the questions, why co-working is here to stay. But feel free to write questions if you have any, and we'll get to that. So why co-working is here to stay? Basically for a few reasons, I think. So remote work is becoming increasingly popular. People are working more and more remotely. People are freelancing more. By the way, it has to do also with kind of a sad effect of the job market becoming not so stable. We can't stay in the same workplace for 20 years already. People have to change. And some of us are just doing gigs or doing very, very short-term projects. And apparently it's becoming more and more of a trend. So the idea is that this reality actually pushes everyone outside of the companies. And of course, co-working are there to fill in the gap. Also, the growth of startup ecosystems is really boosting co-working. Startup ecosystems are born and basically grow exponentially. And those guys, everyone who is working on a startup kind of needs a co-working space. Working from home is not a good idea. Digital nomadism is also on the rise, people doing what I'm doing, and also expat mobility. A lot of people are staying very short-term in a place. So all of this is bringing to a situation that people need very short-term solutions. And that's why basically co-working is getting another boost. One more thing is basically a cost saving efforts of companies and corporations. Companies are now sending people home. So if about 5 or 6 years ago, people had to beg for companies to allow them to work from home, now you have the opposite situation that basically companies are telling a lot of employees, you can't work anymore in the company because we have no more space, so you work from home. I have a few friends that it happened to them, and it was actually a shock for them. They actually looked at it as a really, really bad thing. So kind of interesting, like the trend of companies sending people home while keeping them employed. But when they send people home, people don't want to stay home, and they go to the co-working space. One more thing that I think is important on co-working spaces is basically the phenomenon of urban loneliness. As our cities grow and as the cities are becoming more and more developed, people are becoming more and more independent. And that brings to a situation that also people are becoming more lonely in a way. And co-working are there to fill in the gap of loneliness so you can actually meet other people, especially if you don't have an office, which one of the biggest shocks for me when I was working as an accountant is that how important are the offices in our social life. I was so happy when I left the office, and then basically when I was starting to work on my own, I kind of understood that, wow, I really miss the office. The office was not only a place to work, but was also the center of my social life. So this is something that people usually started to understand, and then they go to the co-working space. And again, of course, the trend of co-working space is also supported by something we mentioned before, the free coffee. So all those reasons are actually showing that co-working is probably here to stay. Maybe the panel later will discuss and have other assumptions or idea. Would be very interesting to hear that. And let me jump to the chat and to see if there are any questions. So Jan is asking if this is recorded. This is recorded. We're going to try to send a recording. Yes, Thomas is asking us about the costs. I'm going to talk about the costs. So that's something I'm going to cover very, very soon in the section of disadvantages of co-working. So I'm going to do 2 slides now about the advantages and the disadvantages, and then Madison is going to join me for discussing trends and some very interesting information that they have in Coworker. Okay, main advantages of coworking. By the way, this is the first time I'm doing this presentation today. So if you have any ideas of things that I missed on advantages or so on, let me know. I'll add it to the slide later so the future generations of listeners can get a better overview. So what are the main advantages of coworking? The first one is to separate work from home. This one is actually pretty important. You want work-life balance, and if you're working in the place where you're living, it's gonna be very difficult to separate. Like you can't separate work from your free time in a way. It kind of makes everything confused, and you're in a zombie mode of at home of working all the time, which is probably not a good idea. Some of you probably have a family as well at home, so mixing this thing of family in working hours is also very frustrating for many people that I've spoken with. And it also allows you to take yourself seriously, because at home it's hard to take yourself seriously. You know, it's like most of us are working in our pajamas and so on, or watching TV while working. So the idea is that you kind of find a more serious environment for work. One more advantage is basically the increase of efficiency. And those are studies that have been shown that basically co-working spaces are increasing our efficiency and making us more focused. So whatever you're paying the co-working space, you're probably going to get back in the revenue that you generate and the value that you create. Another side effect is basically the isolation and happiness of and meeting like-minded people. Needless to say, most of the people who are doing co-working are freelancers or entrepreneurs. And this one is very difficult to be a freelancer or an entrepreneur. And you kind of need to meet the same people like you. So co-working spaces allow that. And that's very, very important, to be surrounded by people who think like you and are independent like you. Co-working are providing you with business infrastructure, internet, printers, coffee, tables, great desks, and whatever. So places to do meetings and so on and so on. So they just close all the gaps that you need while you run your business, which is pretty cool. Networking is another big advantage. I can't stress enough how important is the networking element. If you do it well, those are going to be your clients, your suppliers, your team members, your investors, and so on and so on. So this is a huge advantage. And again, if you understand the power of networking, co-working can be a real boost to your business. Not in the immediate term, but in the medium long term. That's what's going to make the real impact, and co-working provide that. One more advantage is brainstorming and educational events, so you can get a lot of advice from people. Like there's someone here that knows Google Ads, so I go to them every time I have a question. I'm interested in blockchain, to go and check what it's all about. So I'm asking questions here, people. So basically, there are a lot of experts, each one in their fields, and you can just go to them and ask them questions if they're your friends. So the idea is that you're exposed to a lot of knowledge. The events are also great. You can learn a lot from the startup and freelancing events that most co-working spaces have. Social life and new friends, we talked about this. This is a big advantage. If you're not in a regular office, your social life is pretty much, your opportunities of meeting new people are very much limited. We meet people at work and at university, and that's pretty much it. That's kind of the main suppliers of social life that we've got. So co-working is exactly there to provide you with the social life. Coffee shops can get frustrating. Coffee shops are the biggest competitor, I think, of co-working space, but then again, they can get full very, very, very fast, very noisy, bad internet that you can't really rely on. So if you take yourself seriously, coffee shop cannot really be the answer long term. And the last advantage is that co-working spaces actually allow you short-term rent options. So you can rent a space for 1 week, a table for 1 month, and so on. So there is no real commitment here, which is kind of great. In the past, there was a lot of problems of companies falling apart, and that happens to companies, but they had a contract of 12 months. So it's kind of a crazy obligation when you think about the entrepreneurial nature of what we do and the uncertainty to sign a contract for 12 months. And that's what co-working is so great at, that you can do things on the long term, on the short term. So yeah, that's a few of the advantages. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to ask as I jump to the part about the disadvantages. So the main disadvantages of co-working is, first of all, it costs money. Jan was asking about the cost. Depends on where you are. In Romania, I paid 50 euros a month for unlimited access. In London, I paid 300 euro a month. So it really depends on where you are. The average price, I would say, in the Western world is about 220 euros or $250, more or less. That's kind of the average. In the developing world, it's going to be at about 130, 120 or $100. So that's basically the cost that you can expect. And the packages, by the way, of the costs are also changing. Do you want a locker or you don't want a locker? Do you want a fixed desk or do you want a hot desk? Do you want to stay 24/7 or you want to leave every day at 7 and so on? So many co-working spaces have a few some kind of a modular pricing that can kind of change, but they're economical, I have to say. Now, one more disadvantage of co-working is basically the transportation time and cost. So you have to go there every day and go back. This is time and money. And we have to take this into account. So I have to say that a side note that what I noticed is that the main reason of why people choose a co-working space, if you have a few in your city, is the location. Most people actually prefer a co-working space that is close to their home. However, we're going to speak about that in this slide. Like sometimes one co-working space is so much more fitting to you than another that it's worthwhile to travel 10 minutes more a day and actually do the extra transportation to get to a place that you love to spend your day in. Co-working spaces, in my opinion, are not suitable for everyone, especially not for the extreme introverts. So if you're an extreme introvert, or you're very much focused and you're lucky to be focused at home, which is something I don't understand, but some people are amazingly focused at home, maybe co-working is just there for a change of atmosphere 1 day or 2 days a week, but not as a permanent solution. For others, it's going to be basically a daily thing, and I'm here on a daily basis. Co-working spaces can get noisy. You're going to spend time socializing, which is great, but also it might get you out of focus sometimes. So this is another thing to take into consideration on the disadvantages. I think one of the misconceptions of co-working is that people think that maybe they're going to work on projects together with other people. That doesn't happen. So the idea is that you see people around you working with their laptops and so on, but everyone is working on their own project, unless it's a communist co-working space that I had in Spain that tried to force us into working together on the same project, but that was not fun. The idea is that you're basically, you can get clients from the people in the co-working or people that actually provide you services, but the idea is that you're kind of working on your own projects and kind of synergize with the others working on their projects. So that's basically how it usually works. And the last disadvantage is not so much of a disadvantage, but you have to understand that there is a lot of trial and error involved. So it's not co-working are the same. Not all the co-working are the same. I usually recommend people to try at least 5 co-working if you have 5 co-working in your city, and choose the best one for you, because they're very, like, our personality is so different that each one of you is going to find one co-working space a lot better than the other. Some would opt for totally quiet co-working spaces. Some will opt for co-working spaces that have a lot of social interaction and so on and so on. So I totally recommend to kind of do a lot of trial and error. So that was the introduction part of today. And what we're going to do now, we're going to try to get Madison to join us. And we're going to, basically, Madison is in the team of coworker.com, and they're the biggest co-working directory in the world. They have a lot of interesting data. For those of you who are doing a co-working space here, you definitely want to be on coworker.com, so you can sign your coworking there. And I'm going to try to promote Madison to the panel. So just a second, and I think I can stop sharing now the screen. So yeah, okay. So let's see if it works, and you can keep on asking questions. So just a minute as I try to locate Madison. Okay, and promote to panels. Let's see if it works. Hey, Madison. Good. So you're on mute. So you want to unmute yourself at the left bottom corner. Oh, good. Now we can hear you.
Hello,
Excellent.
everyone. How are you?
Okay.
I guess, yeah, you can't really respond directly, but it's so great to join you today. Share a little bit more about Coworker, what we're doing, what we're noticing industry-wise, and then hopefully answer any questions you may have. So I guess first and foremost, I work for Coworker. I head our product team, and I'm also involved with partnerships there. Coworker is the world's largest marketplace for finding places to cowork. So as of today, actually an hour ago, we just surpassed 9,000 coworking spaces, and we are now in 158 countries. So super exciting day for us. Over the past year, I think last year we hit 5,000, and that seems like a huge milestone. But the industry is growing, and it's growing at a way faster rate than we could have ever hoped for. And we're really excited to be a part of it. So as of right now, I guess I can explain a bit about more what Coworker does. So on Coworker, you can find places to co-work in locations that you're looking for a space to work from. You can find spaces, see pictures, prices, read reviews, send spaces messages, schedule tours, request a day pass, or submit a membership inquiry if you want to know more information about longer term solutions like dedicated desks or private offices. We've seen an increasing trend for people booking meeting rooms. So maybe not long-term members, but people who need a meeting room or an event space for people for a shorter period of time, maybe a week span or even a day. So that's also really, that's a huge insight for us, because I think one of the things that Eli was saying was that people are working from coffee shops a lot, but you can't take a call for like this in a coffee shop. If you're hosting interviews, you can't invite people to your living room for an interview or to Starbucks around the corner. So people are really gravitating to utilizing these really beautifully built out spaces to bring clients, employees, or host training seminars. At the moment, Coworker has over 100,000 unique users visiting Coworker every single month looking for a place to co-work. So we are getting a lot of traffic coming in, which is exciting for us and exciting for these spaces that are listed on Coworker as well. And beforehand, spaces adding themselves, it was, again, like we just hit 9,000 spaces on Coworker. At the moment, we have over 300 spaces adding themselves each month, which is a really great number to see on our end. I guess, does anyone have any questions before I dive into some of the trends that we've seen? I'm trying to look if there's a Q&A. You can open that.
Actually, I have a question. The growth rate that you guys are seeing, jumping from 5K to 9,000, do you think those are new co-working spaces that opened last year, or it's something that co-working spaces found out about Coworker and joined recently? Because I'm interested about the growth rate of the industry in total. Is it still growing in exponential rates, or do you see some kind of a linear growth now and it's becoming more of a mature industry?
You know what? I don't have the exact statistics for that. However, I'd assume there's a good mix. However, there is no doubt in saying that the industry is growing and people are discovering, understanding what coworking is, and are opening up coworking spaces in their cities at an increasingly rapid rate. I've attended quite a few co-working conferences, and still there's a large percentage of people who are there that haven't even opened up a co-working space yet, and they're just learning kind of the tips and tricks and are hoping to. So I think it's an industry that's going to grow exponentially over the next 3 years. I think right now there's something like 17,000 co-working spaces worldwide, and by 2022 there's supposed to be over 30,000. And then on top of that, people using co-working spaces, there's also kind of an increase in awareness, which we've seen specifically since the new year, since January. If you look at Google search trends in the past 8 months, people are searching for co-working spaces opposed to office spaces on Google. So if you go to a good resource we use is Keyword Finder, and you can see Google traffic there. So if you type in office spaces in my city or whatever city you're in, you'll see a decrease. And then if you type in co-working spaces or even shared office spaces, you're going to see an increase in Google search trends. So I guess this is also a really good opportunity to add in here for the co-working space managers and operators. Definitely do research on keywords for your sites, do research for your meta descriptions, because you really want to make sure that you're incorporating those so that your rankings are boosted on Google. Another thing is this isn't supposed to sound self-promoting, but by being on Coworker, it does boost your rankings on Google, and also just your visibility on to be found, because right now we are, I'll just get the exact number of spaces. We are number one for on Google for over 900 cities, and we're on page 1 for over 1,250 cities. So, and that's all organic. We don't pay for any of that. So I think, some people like WeWork, I think they're paying upwards of $75 per click on Google. So I just see a comment from Thomas. Is it possible to visit co-working spaces at night? So that is something that I'm sure if you're really interested in, there's a lot of co-working spaces that do offer 24-hour memberships. So I would just message the space to see if they offer that. On Coworker, it will list if they have 24-hour options. So just do your research. This is it's a global, we're turning into a global community. So people are working all crazy hours. Like, I'm the only one on my team based in Canada. So I work with people in India, in Southeast Asia, even like San Francisco. There's like, a little bit of a time difference there. So when I'm at the co-working space that I'm currently based out of in Toronto, like there are people here at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning working all the time. So yeah, just do your research. Again, every space is different. The rules are different, but there's something out there for everyone. Which kind of leads me into another trend, which is niche spaces. I said, sorry, and Will has a question. Well, I'm just gonna, coworker.com, what's been the secret of your success relative to other co-working space listing services? So I think one of the key things for our success is that we are extremely community focused. We pride ourselves on being community powered. We love interacting with the spaces. We're not focused on sending bots your way. To answer your questions, every single person that you're talking to is an actual person. We feature our spaces on Instagram. We reach out, we feature them on our Coworker blog for founders interviews. So I think that's kind of, it's been allowing us to grow with the industry. That's kind of been our secret, is being able to make those genuine relationships and really make the spaces on our site the key focus. Another big thing is the reviews. There aren't any other listing platforms out there for co-working spaces that really focus on reviews, which is really the reason why Coworker started. It was because the co-founders, Sam and Leanne, it took them a week to find a co-working space in Hong Kong. It was a really frustrating experience. They couldn't find the community they were looking for. And so like, why isn't there a Yelp for co-working spaces? And that started Coworker, and it was just a passion project for them. But now it's turned into, I would still say it's a passion project for all of us, but now it's a business.
I have a quick question for you, Madison, about basically a lot of people are now talking about WeWork and Regus with spaces. So do you have information about how many of your spaces are the community-based spaces and how many of them are maybe the global networks, the big ones?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, yeah, the Regises and the WeWorks are kind of like the elephant in the room. You know, people have mixed feelings, but I think they've done a really excellent job for putting co-working on the map, attracting investors to the co-working industry. As far as their presence in the market and engagement from users on coworker.com, like we have Regis on our site, not all of the locations because there's some blurred lines whether it's co-working or not. We do have WeWork on our site, but still then large networks, even outside of the Regis and the WeWork, only 12% of the spaces on Coworker are networks. 88% are actually the independents. And we actually, our engagement rates are way higher with the independent spaces, particularly when you get those member reviews, because again, people are looking for co-working places that or co-working spaces that are conducive to what they're looking for and looking to accomplish. I know one of the points you made during your first discussion was that there are people who are introverted and maybe, you know, don't want to work from co-working spaces because they'd rather work from home or in a really quiet environment. I actually worked for a month out of a co-working space in Chiang Mai, and it was all developers, and you could hear a pin drop. So there are places for people who are introverted and just want to put their head down, but maybe don't want to work from their home or from a coffee shop. Yeah, and there's another one here in Toronto. It's called Dev Hub, and yeah, it's developer focused. So there's something for everyone.
Excellent. Great. Any other interesting stats to share before we get Matthias and Will to the panel?
I would say some other cool things that we've seen again are niche spaces. So, you know, spaces that are focused maybe just for lawyers or for designers, architects. There's a huge a huge shift in real estate, people using repurposing real estate for co-working. So you're seeing them pop up in malls. You're seeing hotels transform old, boring business centers into co-working spaces. The other one, like bars and restaurants, spacious is one of the big ones, but there are even a couple in Toronto that are, you know, during the day using it as a co-working space, and at night it's bar or restaurant. So it's really neat to see.
Yeah, we have this in Israel as well. There is a bar pass now for all the hip bars in Tel Aviv, that in the morning they're co-working space, and then at 6 o'clock they throw everyone and start partying and have beer. So yeah, that's pretty amazing to see the trend. Super cool.
Yeah. And I know, just from my perspective, co-working has completely transformed my life. I moved to Toronto about 1.5 years ago, and I came from a smaller city before that. And like now I'm running into people in the grocery store that I know, like this is my family here. Great networking events. I've made really great friends. I've made mentors. To your point, like if I have a question about Google AdWords, I can go ask like the specialist in Google AdWords. So for anyone who is kind of skeptical about joining a co-working space, I highly recommend just doing it. A lot of co-working spaces will have benefits. So for example, I'm a part of an ambassador program at the space I work from. So I help out, I sit the front desk 1 day a week. I promote the space just by like talking to people about it when they come in, and then I get my hot desk membership. So those are really valuable programs too for entrepreneurs who are interested in co-working, really want to help promote the spaces and communities they're working from. So I think that's just something to keep in mind.
Excellent. So I think we can try to get Will and Matthias here. So let me just try to. The first time we have a big panel. It's pretty interesting with the technology to combine it. So I'm promoting Will and Matthias. The idea is that Will and Matthias are both very experienced in the co-working scene, and they have a co-working space, which is another angle. In addition to Madison having working on the biggest co-working directory in the world, also it's good to hear the take of people who are actually running co-working spaces. So that's amazing. So Will, Matthias, can you hear us? There is a unmute button on the left bottom of the screen. So you can,
Yeah, thank you. I can hear you all right. I hope my audio is good too.
excellent. So Matthias live from Bansko, great. And Will, can you hear us? You have also an unmute button on the left. Good. So maybe we can start with Matthias doing a quick introduction about your activities in the beautiful ski resort of Bansko in Bulgaria, right? So yeah.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. So about 2 years ago, I started a co-working space in a small mountain village in Bulgaria. In the winter, it's a ski resort. It's a pretty nice ski resort, actually. But in the summer, it's really just like a village. I mean, there's only 10,000 people living here, which is an interesting challenge for a co-working space because unlike a big city like Berlin or New York, you don't have a lot of designers or software developers or other type of people that normally use a co-working space. Even there's not enough lawyers here. I mean, it's like really very, very few people locally that would be suitable for a co-working space. And we realized this very early on. So our strategy was to attract people to our rural location. And I think this is also one of the important trends that a lot of people realize that they are no longer bound to a specific office. So if you don't have to work in an office while you live in a city, the question is, do you really have to live in a city? And for a lot of people, the answer is no, actually we can travel. We are becoming more and more location independent. And as long as we have internet and interesting people around us, we can also work from a small village in Bulgaria. And this is why Uwe and I created the space. And in the meantime, we have convinced a good amount of people to move to Bansko, to our village. And we are currently about 40 members, which I think is a pretty sizable number, considering that none of these members are local.
No, that's pretty amazing. You should be the mayor of Bansko, Matthias. Actually, I would vote for you for the mayor of Bansko, so that's an awesome introduction. Will, do you want to introduce yourself, the expert of co-working in Prague? So if you do, unmute yourself and take it away. Oh, we can't hear you, Will. You have to unmute. There is a button, red button, at the bottom of the screen, left.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, now we can. Excellent.
Okay, great. I'm Will. Thanks very much for having me on here, and hello to the audience out there. I run a co-working space in Prague, Czech Republic. I guess at this point, it's the longest running co-working space in the country, but there were others before me. I think what's special, it's called Locus Workspace, and I think like there's some other spaces in Prague, but what's special about Prague and what's special about Locus maybe is it's a very, very international city, which means, and my space is an English language space, so what it means is there are members from right now about 30 different countries around the world. And I think in a place like Prague, if you move to a country like that and want to live and work in a foreign country that you don't know that well, that's one of the great advantages of co-working, I guess, is that you can join a space like that. You turn your head and there's 100 other people who have done the same thing that you're trying to do and can answer questions about getting a visa, setting up a business, who's a good lawyer, who's a good accountant, in a way that isn't as true for locals who grew up their whole life in Prague. They can do that too, but they don't need it as much. And so there's this great value. It's a kind of networking, but I think it's a more authentic and meaningful kind of networking that's great. And so I feel really lucky mainly to have been a part of that because I get to meet people from all over the world who are doing interesting things and are full of adventure.
Excellent, that's great. So if anyone has any questions for Matthias and Will before Madison and me start interrogating them a little bit, that would be great. Madison, I think you have a question in the QA section from Kennedy, asking basically how coworker.com allows people to categorize the spaces so they can get the best match, because as we discussed, co-working spaces are so different from each other. I think nobody even tried to categorize them, but are you thinking of trying to do a little bit of tagging, categorizing based on the type of co-working?
So we started doing that a little bit. We have it for maker spaces, for spaces by the beach, spaces in ski country, female focused spaces, but I think there's a lot more that can be done. We do have filters that people can choose different amenities. and different co-working space characteristics from. So if you want one that has a pool or a gym or wheelchair access or free parking, so we have all of those. As far as all of the niche spaces, like let's say for like maybe one we're not covering at the moment is maybe one that's specific to lawyers or one that's specific to designers and architects. Those are definitely opportunities for us to pursue. Again, we're community powered. So if anyone has any recommendations for things that we could add to the site, please feel free to email me at madison@coworker.com. And we can work on improving in those areas. Aside from that, it's member reviews and your descriptions on your coworker profiles, and making those like keyword focused as well definitely would help. But in the future, let's all collaborate and we'll make it as easy as possible to match people to your space.
Super cool. So I have a question actually for the three of you. What would co-working look like in 5 years? Would it, first of all, increase, decrease, stay the same? And what do you see as the major trends that are happening and you think are going to be different in 5 years from now? So whoever wants to take it away.
I think that it's definitely going to increase. In 2 years alone, there's supposed to be 480 million college-educated people working remotely, or those are actually freelance workers, and 150 million corporate employees are going to be working from co-working spaces. So there is going to be an increase in supply simply because there's going to be an increase in demand. It is not an oversaturated market at the moment. You just have to have know what goes into running a successful co-working space. And then as far as what co-working is going to look like, I think that there is really no definitive answer, because it's not going to look like a WeWork or a Regis. There has to be options for everyone out there, based on what you're looking for. So if you want to go work from the mountains in Bansko, you can do that. If you want to work in the financial district in Toronto, you can do that as well. So there's going to be something for everyone.
Excellent. So basically, you don't think that there's going to be one giant WeWork that takes over the market?
Absolutely not.
Okay, good.
I think probably co-working will just become working, right? I mean, there's some aspects of co-working that are applicable to all business environments. And even though this maybe more independent run space will not be the big trend in the future. So I think there will be more corporate real estate deals. There were more companies doing co-working. Also, the definition of co-working will probably expand to include other types of collaborative work environments. But I really think this is the future. So I don't see how the traditional office can survive.
By the way, before we switch to Will, are you saying, Matthias, that you think the traditional office is going to disappear on the long term?
It's not so long term. I mean, there's really no reason why people should go to an office to work, right? So we all work on our computers. We can all take our laptops wherever we feel productive. Very often, this traditional office place was really only there because you needed to collaborate with people, exchange information with people, and go to some meetings. But you don't need to have a desk in a certain building to be productive. And there's less and less jobs that require this old traditional office environment. People want to be more independent. They want to be more free. They're also probably more productive outside an office where they're just distracted by their coworkers. So I think we will see this traditional office culture going away very, very quickly.
Nice.
Should I chime in? I don't have that much to add to the comments. I think clearly it's growing. Clearly it's going to keep growing for at least a little while. At some point it'll stop growing, but there's so many other things that are growing at the same time as co-working that complement one another. There's more freelancers, there's more startups. It's not just in one part of the world, it's all over the world. It's growing everywhere. Laws are changing to support it. Industry's growing to support it. It's not just co-working. I mean, these things are all complementing one another. So to me, the idea that it would suddenly stop in the next year or so doesn't make any sense. I do imagine, just like with anything that grows over time, that it will become more and more diversified, and there will be more and more different kinds of businesses doing this. The one thing I would disagree with, just because it's always fun to disagree, but I also believe it. I don't think that the traditional office is dead for a long time to come. And I often will say that one of the shortcomings of co-working for people who run a company with several employees is that you're not working in the same place. And there are advantages to that. There's a lot of freedom. But I come from an academic background, and you would think that a scientific group, when you're trying to collaborate and find truth out there, that it wouldn't matter where you are, that you would collaborate with the people who are the best suited to collaborate with you from all over the world. But the people who end up writing papers together are overwhelmingly more likely to be down the hall from one another. And the ability to connect like we're connecting right now is great, but when you're eating lunch together and turning your head and talking to each other, you form a kind of social bond that you can't really form as easily over a chat. And I think that if companies think that they can have a completely distributed workforce, which a lot do, and a lot do it successfully, that's great. But I do think they're at a disadvantage to a well-run company that can have people working in the same location, because that social proximity can't really be beat. So that's an alternate point of view. That doesn't mean co-working is going out the window. I just think there's room for both.
I think that just to that point, a lot of companies are actually, maybe they're not getting rid of their traditional office environment or setting, but they're actually just shifting them into co-working spaces. I've seen that quite a bit. Even just down the hall, there's a team of 30 from me working in an office. And they're totally a part of the co-working environment and community, but then that still keeps that collaboration there from a team standpoint. There's another big company in Toronto that they have a prime real estate on the corner of King and Spadina, and they're moving 70 people into a co-working space. So I'm not sure if that's just.
So I mean, to that point, I think for sure there's a lot of companies doing that, and that's great. But if the idea is that that's the way that all companies will go, I think I'm biased. I would love everybody to join a co-working space. I run a co-working space. It's great. But I think the Yahoo model, where they brought all the workers back from being remote workers and said you should all work at one company, even though that was controversial and maybe a big mistake, they did it for a reason, because there is corporate culture and that matters. And you can move your people into a co-working space and say distributed work. That's great. There's a big perk to that. But I do think it would be a mistake to not recognize there's also a cost. One guy I know who runs a pretty successful co-working space in the LA area said, one of the big mistakes that companies make is they send people to his co-working space, because they end up leaving that company and forming a new company with the people they're working with in the co-working space. I'm not saying that's the rule, but there really are, I think, aspects of social proximity that are important.
Yeah, for sure.
I agree as well. And that's again what Madison said, that the option of having an office in a co-working space is something that startups are opting into. I do see a situation in which, when startups are becoming too big, they leave the co-working space. So at some certain point, at critical mass, kind of it's the time to go away, but at least co-working spaces allow you the initial phase of kind of having a place to start. Madison, I wanted to ask you about from the bookings that you guys have, and by the way, I just want to say something about coworker.com. One of the best functionalities of the site is that a lot of co-working spaces, if I understand correctly, allowed you to have one free trial via the platform, that I see as one of the biggest advantages that you've got, because now if I go to a co-working space and actually ask them for a free day, a lot of them told me, book us on coworker.com. So basically this, I'm just interested in Madison to hear about how many of the co-working spaces are actually giving this 1 day free to try. And from our co-working friends here who own a co-working space, do you give it, or is it sometimes too annoying to give a free day for people to try?
So I don't have that breakdown in front of me, but I can certainly find out, and then maybe you can email that out to the attendees, so percentage. But that is a marketing tool that has to be activated by the co-working space owner or operator. Some people value their day passes at $50 a day. So we're definitely not just saying free day passes for all. So yeah, co-working space owners can choose to give a free day pass, or they can say get day pass, which in that case the person would pay once they arrived at the space. At this exact moment, Coworker doesn't handle any of the transactions. We just send the leads directly to the owner and operator's inbox, and then they can take it from there.
Nice.
Yeah, of course, we also have a free day pass, also on the Coworker platform, and there's a few other programs like the Coworking Visa, where members of other co-working spaces can request some free days. But I think we are also in a very special situation because we basically have no walk-ins. Because as I already mentioned, there's very few people in Bansko that would be suitable members of a co-working space. So basically everyone is coming to our village because of the co-working space. And once they're here, they stay more than one day. But yes, we have a free day and you just walk in, and it's also on the door everywhere. And I think it's a good marketing tool to show that we are also generous. So we don't charge people for every single minute they come into the co-working space. But in our case, it's also not that we are losing any revenue through this.
I do have one question to that, because I think, again, you're in a unique situation, because if someone's coming to Bansko and they want to work, if they have a free day pass at Coworking Bansko and they love it, then they'll keep coming back. But does anyone on this webinar have any experiences with people abusing free day passes? Perhaps like, oh, I'm in New York for the day, so I'm just going to find a free day pass, work for there for free, and then like I'm going to take the next flight out. And because I know that the free day pass isn't really there just for a free place to work. It's to try to get people, it's to attract people to your community. But does anyone have any complaints with that or issues with it? Or do you just think someone coming into your space, and if they can talk positively about it after, whether they're a full-time member or not, that's good enough?
My feeling is we get a lot of people who just use the free day pass and we never see them again. Partly because a lot of people are just traveling through Prague or wherever, any big city they're just traveling through for a day and they need a place to work. A lot of them actually ask to pay, and I say, no, just take the free day pass because I'm offering it anyway. So I don't have a good answer to your question, except to say that there clearly is some intangible benefit from that. The good word of mouth spreading. To some extent, I feel like it's partly just to be competitive. Almost every co-working space I know of offers a free day, certainly in Prague. And so to not offer it puts you to some extent at a competitive disadvantage. But I do feel like it's a nice tool because I want to make sure it's a good match. And so it's sort of good customer service in a way to offer a free day. I haven't had people really try to take advantage of it in a more like intentionally manipulative way, like pretend they didn't come for a free day and come 3 times or something. So the worst that's been is they use it when they only need it for a day, but I know that. I know that's a possibility.
Yeah.
I just took over for a second. Can you see my screen?
Nice.
So this is Bansko.
This is where Matthias puts his big pitch for why everyone should move to Bansko.
Okay, actually, fun fact, this is a building where I live in. So if you scroll to
Wow.
this picture, you would see where my apartment is.
That's amazing. Good, very good. Excellent. So a quick question.
I have a question too.
Yeah.
So Will and Matthias, what kind of things do you do to help support like the entrepreneurial ecosystems within your spaces? Like, do you, or just like help the community?
Okay, I think
I'll start if you want, or go ahead, Matthias, sorry.
Okay, I mean, I think these are 2 different questions, right? So for an entrepreneurial ecosystem, I think you need to have an actual ecosystem. And there's different factors that influence an ecosystem. You need to have universities where you have entrepreneurs coming from the students trying new ideas. You need to have some successful companies where the founders then become business angels to help the next generation of companies. You need to have a lot of events. You need to have access to talent because normally you want to scale your business. And in Bansko, we have none of those things. So unfortunately, it's not an entrepreneurial ecosystem. However, we do quite a few things to help our community. So we have a lot of solo entrepreneurs, people running small teams, and we often do events in the co-working space to showcase what everyone is working on, to see who has what skills and who needs what skills, and then making these connections between people. And there are several success stories where people actually met in the co-working space and then either started doing a new business together, a small business, not like a big startup that becomes the next unicorn, but more like a WordPress plugin or a piece of content for digital content, or we have two people that are doing Amazon FBA together now. So simpler business models where you don't need big access to capital and lots of other resources. And I think this works very well because we are such a small community. People come here, they feel it's a very safe space for them, so they are sharing very openly what their challenges are and also what their skills are, and this just brings people together.
Yeah, I would answer surprisingly similarly, even though Prague has a pretty great startup scene, I think. And there's several co-working spaces that really target startups with a lot of those same aspects that you both mentioned, like mentors and angel investors and things. Locus, my co-working space, very intentionally chose not to go in that direction. Part of the reason I wanted to open a co-working space is because of the challenges that I think freelancers and location-independent workers face. If you're on your own and you work from your flat or you work from a cafe, you often get depressed, you often get lonely, you might procrastinate, your only feedback you get is in your own head. And so the kinds of support we try to offer aren't really the startup, become the next Google kinds of support, but the kinds of support that are really psychological about the challenges of doing your best work when you're really on your phone, on your own, and on your phone maybe. And those challenges, I think, are largely psychological. I don't think humans, for the most history of human civilization, we're in pretty hierarchical and social environments when we work, and suddenly we're all on our own, and I don't think we're very well suited to do that. And at the very least, it takes a lot of skill to develop that. And so for me, the co-working space value is trying to create that. Some of that is a social aspect. So we have very informal social events a lot. We have a coffee break once a week, and we have a lunch once a week. And those are ways that aren't exactly networking. They're ways to really get to know the people you're working with while you can still have a really productive work day. We have a pub night once a month. We have a poker night once every 2 months. But those kinds of informal social activities, to me, are the biggest part of the success of our co-working space, at least, because those are the ways that the members can still have a really productive work day, not feel like they're getting interrupted, but they can also really get to know the people they're working with and feel like they're building those connections that they really need.
Fantastic.
So I think we have a question from the crowd, from Kennedy. A question for Matthias and Will. From what I understand from it, basically the question is about the synergies that co-working spaces have to create to connect people with same interest, and maybe the community leaders are supposed to do those synergies. But at the same time, there is also a question about privacy. I know that our community manager here is very active. He's saying, oh, you're doing this, you should speak with him because he's doing that, and so on and so on. So maybe Lovit addressed the topic of privacy and connecting people. Was this ever an issue for one of you, or you're not facing GDPR just yet? I guess everyone is focused on GDPR now, but something to mention about this?
Yeah, I'll go first just because it's a topic that's hit me recently several times. We definitely have issues with privacy. We have one single open space. We don't have private offices at all. And I end up losing members sometimes because they really need to be making calls. We have places to make phone calls. We have meeting rooms where people can call. We have a Skype calling room. But a lot of people really need a private office. Some of my past members were doing work in the medical research domain in the US, and they have these high compliance rules. They're not allowed to be out of the country, and they're living in a foreign country. So they can't have 6 different languages going around in the background where they're on a business call. And so I have, that is a big issue. And I think there's enough co-working spaces out there, if you need that have a mix of private offices as well as a nice community, that you can find those solutions. But for us, that's an issue. We also have to have, partly because it's one big open space, we have a quieter co-working space than I would like. I think a lot of people join co-working spaces, they want to be able to talk and interact and have a social element. If you go into a space where everybody is quiet working, you don't have that. On the other hand, a lot of the people join my co-working space because they like that also. They like this aspect of everybody are in there. You know, you have a feeling of there's a lot of focused work going on, and there's kind of social contagion with that focused work, where to kind of watch a movie or just do nothing in there would feel somehow really wrong, and people wouldn't even want to do it when they're in that environment. But so we have issues, but not as I think there's enough diversity out there in what you can find in co-working spaces that it doesn't matter. Not in Bansko, but in Prague.
Yeah, unfortunately, we had this issue a few months ago. Because as I said, so we have a lot of events where people share what they're working on and also what their challenges are. And generally, it has always worked out nicely. So I think it's better for people to work together than to compete with each other. However, we matched two members that unfortunately also got romantically involved, and they wanted to start a new business. And one of the members told the other member everything about her business model. And then when this whole thing broke apart, unfortunately, the other member kind of stole the idea, used all the information that she provided to set up an exact copy of the business model. We then had to remove the member. We have a code of conduct. And even though normally we cannot enforce a non-compete, it went so bad that kind of the members spread a lot of rumors, and there was like a lot of bad blood between the two. Then we had to make a call and see like how can we correct this in our community. And I think since then, a lot of the members also got a little bit more careful with what they share and with whom they share it. So I think there's one level of sharing where you can tell people what you're working on. And then there's another level of sharing where you kind of put all your trade secrets out in the open. And this is not necessarily the best idea.
Interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
I feel kind of mixed about it because there's the first thing you said, Matthias, which I think is really true, is there's this incredible advantage you get from sharing your ideas, because people part of creativity and part of insight is the ideas you get from other people when you're bouncing your own ideas off each other, and people contribute to an idea and make it more complicated and more rich when you're willing to share. And I think it's one of the missing aspects. Or sometimes when groups are so worried about competition, they're afraid to share anything. I think in a lot of ways they often will grow less quickly. But of course, there's always that risk that someone will take your idea and run with it. I sort of think it probably depends on the domain a little too. Like the biotech industry, I'm sure, is more worried about stolen ideas than software development, but I don't know.
Interesting. Oh, sounds good. It was a very good discussion. I think we're way over the hour that we got for this. So wanted to thank all of you for joining. We're going to have one more webinar in 3 hours for our friends in the United States time zone. So I know Madison is joining me. She's not going to leave me alone. So if Matthias and Will, if you're around in 3 hours, it would be great to have you as well. And yeah, great. Any parting words from any of you?
I just want to thank you guys at coworker.com. We've gotten so many new day passes in the last year or so from you specifically. You guys are doing something right. So thank you for sending a lot of digital nomads mostly our way. And Matthias, I see you guys in Bansko and have thought a lot about how we could figure out a way to get out there, because it's so beautiful. And I come from the mountains myself and would love to figure out some way to get out there. So it's nice what you're doing, and it's so nice to see it successful in a relatively small town.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much for this great panel. Will, it's super easy to come here. Just take a cheap flight with Wizz Air. I can send you a link if you need. Madison, we love Coworker. We have your stickers here. We have a counter for all the reviews that we show. You're on our website. So great job.
Thank you. Well, we love your support. So both Matthias and Will, if you ever have any suggestions for us for what we can do better, please let me know. That goes out to everyone who has joined the webinar today. Again, my email is madison@coworker.com. So any suggestions you may have, feel free to send them my way. Also, you can reach me at partners@coworker.com as well, if that's easier to remember.
Excellent. So thanks everyone. Thanks for arriving, for all our chat friends here. And yeah, see you in our next webinar. Thank you. Bye everyone.
Bye.